Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on your time zone. My name is Richard Brzezowski, and I'm the project director for Maine AgrAbility, and I'm today's moderator for this session, this virtual session of the National Training Workshop. Thank you for joining us. Today's session is programmatic factors that lead to changes in quality of life and independent living and working levels with AgrAbility clients, and a 25-year overview of AgrAbility demographics. So some rules for today's session. Please mute your microphone and rename your screen with your first and last name so people know who you are, if you haven't done so already. If you need closed caption, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And if you have questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer them as time allows. We will be recording the session. It will be available on the National AgrAbility website at a later date. And at the end of the session, please click on the link in the chat box to complete a short evaluation of this session. So thank you. So today we have two speakers. I'm going to introduce them both and then we'll get started. Dr. Hamida Jinnah directs the Research and Evaluation Unit within the Institute of Human Development and Disability at the University of Georgia, where she is an associate research faculty. She is an experienced evaluator and is an active member of the American Evaluation Association. She and her team recently completed a comprehensive statewide needs assessment to explore the employment needs of individuals with disabilities for the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, or the GVRA. She uses a multi-method approach to research and evaluation and has experience in both randomized control evaluations using large data sets as well as qualitative evaluations. She's been working with Robert Fetsch at Colorado State University and the National AgrAbility Project on a qualitative study exploring the programmatic and personal factors that affect clients' experience with the AgrAbility Project, as well as project impact. Dr. Robert, or Bob Fetsch, was raised on a small dairy farm in Texas. He first served 6 years as an extension specialist and assistant professor at the University of Kentucky. Then he served 26 years as an extension specialist and professor at Colorado State University Extension. For 16 years as director, plus 7 years as co-director with Norm Dahlstedt of the Colorado AgrAbility Project, the Colorado team has served over 602 Colorado clients and their families from 1999 to 2021. Bob works closely with the National AgrAbility Project at Purdue University, as well as the University of Illinois and AgrAbility teams across the US to find out which of our AgrAbility Project efforts work best to increase our clients' quality of life and independent living and working levels. That's what we do with AgrAbility. We assist farm and ranch families with functional limitations. We help them bounce back from accidents, illnesses, and functional limitations, and we give them hope. And that's with an exclamation point. So I'll turn it over to Hamida, our first speaker. And Hamida, you're muted.
Okay, I'm gonna try to do this again. Let's see here, and then all right, hello everybody. So I guess you know, as you know, that this is going to be a two-part presentation, where the first half we're going to go over the qualitative study that focused on the programmatic and personal factors related to the evaluation of the AgrAbility project. And in the second half, Bob will share, Dr. Fetsch will share findings and the latest progress on the multitude of quantitative studies that have been done about the impact of the AgrAbility project. So to begin with, I'll just give you, just to give you some background, as most of you already know that farmers and ranchers experience a high rate of injury and disability often related to agricultural accidents and even other causes. Since they are such an integral part of our economy, the USDA, as well as the National NIFA, which is the National Institute on Food and Agriculture, has the AgrAbility Project. Basically, I guess the goal of our project is to help the farmers cope up with the disabilities and the resulting limitations. As you all probably know, one of the most important goals of the project is to enhance and protect the quality of life of farmers with disabilities and to enable them to continue their engagement in production agriculture. State AgrAbility teams provide education, information, networking, services, including either face-to-face or virtual visits, to the workplace, to the home, so as to observe and understand the individual as well as the family's goals and needs. The purpose of this particular qualitative study has been to take the next step and conduct in-depth phone interviews with farmers and ranchers with disabilities who have been past clients of the AgrAbility Project. And the goal has been to explore and understand the key programmatic as well as personal factors. For some reason, my slide is flipping on its own. Okay, hold on. Let me, I want to be able to manually do this. Okay, hopefully it will not flip now. So in order to look at the factors that have contributed to significant changes in their scores on two measures, the quality of life measure, and Dr. Fetsch will share more about each of those measures a little later, and the independent living and working level measures. Tess, if you can help out. I mean, it's still flipping on its own. I'm not sure why, but I'm going to continue here. So in terms of the methodology, what we did is, to identify the sample for this, we looked at clients' change scores from pre-test to post-test by subtracting post-test minus pre-test, to get a difference score or a change score on two scales, the quality of life measure as well as the independent living and working measure. These change scores were then rank ordered from high to low. A final pool of 26 clients was, basically obtained, which included 13 who had improved the most and 13 who had improved the least. Our goal was to ideally interview at least 10 high scorers and compare them to the 10 low scorers. It was a two-step process. So the researchers, we first contacted the state project, who in turn contacted the clients, gave them more information about the study, and asked for their permission to participate. And after that, after the clients consented, then the researchers called the clients directly to be able to do the interview. Phone interviews were conducted with 9 past clients of the project who either had the highest or the lowest combined change scores on each of those measures. We encountered several barriers or hurdles when doing the interviewing, especially with low scorers, which is very expected when we do any evaluative study. One of the key reasons was also the lapse in time. So these clients went back a few years, and so it was a little harder to track them, and then many of them could not be reached. So in terms of the issues, there were a high rate of deceased people who were in hospice or otherwise not reachable. The phones or the mailing addresses could not be reached. And plus, there was lack of cooperation from a number of state projects. State projects being very busy, they had a harder time. Even when they tried to call the clients, they had a difficult time reaching the clients. So it was just very difficult to get that engagement. After overcoming a lot of difficulties, we finally successfully interviewed a total of 9 clients. The pool was from 12 different states. And the clients in this study were actually from 4 states, of which majority of the high scorers were actually from one state, one of the states. So I mean, just in terms of trend. Semi-structured interviews were conducted. We had embedded probes in there. to be able to facilitate the discussion. To give you a little glimpse of the sample, clients with the project had an average of, the average age was 65 years. They had been with the project for an average of 8 months, and this was during the duration of 2013 through 2017. So there is this contextual grounding in the theory, in the study, in terms of how we interpret the data. The primary disabilities included amputations, leg amputations, either above or below the knee, joint injuries, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, peripheral neuropathies. Secondary included very similar arthritis, joint injuries, orthopedic injuries. Tertiary included, arthritis, diabetes. Majority of the farmers were engaged in field or row crops, followed by some in livestock, one in dairy and one in vegetable farming. Grounded theory approach was used to collect and analyze the data using constant comparative method until the themes reached a point of saturation. Key themes emerging from the data and the inferences have been presented here. So I think the first part, we don't have a lot of time. There is a lot that we have, related to the study, and we are in the process of publishing it. So hopefully it will be available to everyone pretty soon. But I'm going to try to keep this very focused. Clients who improved the most had a few important key factors that distinguished them from those who improved the least. And some of the key factors that were present for clients who improved the most were, one was perceived social support that they received from the project. They received assistive technology and other supports from either vocational rehabilitation agency or other agencies. They had high intrinsic mastery motivation, and they had a high level of family support. And then we'll also talk about clients who improved the least and what are some things that distinguish them. So let's talk a little more about the perceived social support. Positive experiences with the project staff seem to be one of the most important determining factors. And as expected, we all know that when the staff visited the farm for the comprehensive needs assessment, they listened to the farmers felt very understood. Also, what they did was not only observe them doing their daily tasks, discuss them about what they do on a daily basis, and then it was a very individualized, process where they give recommendations and information, such as those related to assistive technology modifications, in order to make tasks easier as well as safer for the farmers. Regular communication from the project staff seemed to play a very important role, because eventually it helped in the development of the trusting relationship. And we also know from past findings and from this study is that the more stronger the trusting relationship was, the more likely the farmers were to stay engaged with the project and to benefit from the project. So regular timely follow-up from the services was an important thing. As this one client shared, that they felt so trusted. They trusted the project staff so much. They felt that they were always in their corner, cared so much about them, and it's this attachment and the deep respect that they have for the project staff. So that's one of the biggest assets of the project. Clients also felt supported. One of the ways was that sometimes when the AgrAbility staff normalize the functional limitations that the clients have, the clients may feel less isolated and more understood and more connected with other farmers and ranchers. So that could be one of the processes that happen that make clients feel more connected. There is reduced stress and improved mental health that clients reported because of their engagement with the project. In general, perceived social supports have been moderately linked to improved management of chronic health conditions. So that did play a role. Clients report a positive impact on their positive physical health, mental health, behavioral health, as well as independent functioning. And some of this has been established by past quantitative studies as well, and Dr. Fetsch, will include that. It is, as we all know, that farming, it's not just a job, it's not just a vocation, it's a way of life. So when clients are able to accomplish tasks and do things on the farm on a daily basis, in spite of their limitations, it gives them a strong sense of meaning and engagement in life, and it makes them feel empowered. The other second, a very important factor that was identified by clients was assistive technology and supports that they receive from VR. So a majority of the clients who improved the most reported receiving significant tangible benefits from either VR or the project or other entities in terms of AT devices, recommendations, modifications, new equipment to make things easier. I mean, the average range from $1,000 to more than $45,000 in funding from VR. Many farmers got reported things like getting an ATV, UTV, bobcats, and then putting in tractor steps, lifts, having different types of implements. And we know that from the past literature that receiving assistive technology reduces the dependence of individuals with disabilities on others for personal care and even for work, and significantly increases their quality of life. So, I mean, it's all tied in that the more AT they had, the more independent farmers felt, the more empowered they felt. Clients' intrinsic mastery motivation. Now, that's another factor that we identified that probably plays an important role. I'm sorry, I have some the lawn mowing going on right at this time outside my house. So hopefully, they'll move fast. So excuse the background noise. Clients who improved the most reported that they had high intrinsic motivation to implement the strategies as well as proactively initiate new strategies related to assistive technology on the farm. Mastery motivation refers to an individual's persistent attempts to overcome obstacles and limitations. So farmers who have reported a high motivation were more likely to benefit from the project. And they were also more likely to, in turn, be able to continue farming and doing tasks on the farm. Like this farmer who reported that it helps you start to realize your own strength. He mentioned about that, he put steps on his tractor, and then he said he purchased a little skid steer loader and used it for a lot of lifting, which otherwise he would have done it himself. So even being able to implement some of the strategies to prevent secondary injuries was another thing mentioned by farmers in terms of them being proactive. Family support was an important factor, was also identified. Clients who improved the most had increased family support, and that would look different for many farmers. But in some support would involve as simple as encouraging clients to adopt safe practices and continue doing things safely. So it was simple reminders like, how about you use this? Or how about you wear your gloves? Remember what the staff told you. And so simple reminders from family help a lot. Conversely, if there are things going on within the family, for example, one farmer had a wife who had a significant health issue going on, and so that pulled a lot of the family's resources and prevented the farmer from being fully engaged with the project. So it is important to also consider family factors contextually and how they may influence how much a farmer is engaged and how much they benefit from the project. Clients who improved the least had some factors, that have been identified. So like we said, one of the most important factors is the client communication and relationship with the project staff. So the converse of that is also true. When there were gaps in communication between the staff and the client, or VR and the client and the staff, the clients were less likely to stay engaged and to receive full benefits from the project. There were issues related to VR that were mentioned, some of them including excessive paperwork, to be able to become eligible for VR services. VR ineligibility, so one client was determined to be ineligible, and that led to a lot of disappointment. Delay in obtaining VR services. Also, VR counselors' lack of knowledge about farming and farm tasks. So farmers felt very disappointed that the counselors could not even understand what they did on a daily basis and what their needs were. Technological factors were also identified as a barrier, as we know that the average age of clients, was 65 years, is 65 years. And so they had a very difficult time. Some clients experienced challenges adopting new technology. So that's something to always keep in mind. And then lack of specialized expertise in some areas. So for example, here the sensory impairment of visual expertise was mentioned as being needed, both at the VR level as well as the AgrAbility project level. We have little time. So what I try to do is, the other part is where we've identified and teased out those factors in terms of what are some clustered programmatic factors and what are some personal factors. As far as programmatic factors, we've classified them into two categories. There are some factors that are facilitators and some can be barriers. So the facilitative factors include things like the comprehensive farm assessments and recommendations, which is one of the most important and crucial services provided by AgrAbility and is so appreciated by the clients. The assistive technology recommendations and modifications, both including the in-house as well as referrals, the funding for equipment or modifications, either from VR or other agencies, and then ongoing communication and timeliness of services and the trust and the relationship aspect of it. Some barriers, which we already touched upon before, but just in terms of the communication piece, that when that was weak and when there were lapses or gaps in communication, that proved to be a big barrier. And then a few of the other issues related to a vocational rehabilitation agency. So when there was excessive paperwork involved, delay in VR services, the VR counselor could not understand the farmer's needs, and the nuances of the farm tasks that led to frustration for the clients. And then VR ineligibility. Also, personal factors included clients' intrinsic motivation. It also included extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation included AgrAbility project level factors in terms of how much ongoing motivation and pull and information that they received from the project, and other external factors. Did they have peers that were also benefited and kind of propelled them or motivated them? Technological limitations is another factor, and then the family level factors that also can be important. So right now there are a lot of these to delve into. So what we're going to do is I'll just try to go into a few of those and show you some comments. That way you know what farmers share, and then we'll wrap it up, and then we can talk more as you have questions. And of course, a lot of this will be included in the detailed manuscripts. So before we go, okay, so we'll delve into a couple of these. So the comprehensive farm assessments and recommendations. So this was one of the most important things that almost every client who benefited and who had a high change score talked about and raved about, that this process, it was so beneficial to have the staff member come, listen to them, understand them. It helped build the trusting relationship. It helped them discuss, what their needs were and were able to get the appropriate advice or recommendations. So like this 41-year-old client with multiple sclerosis talked about the process, and he said that after that, they helped me get all these things. So I really appreciated that process. The second piece was assistive technology recommendations and modifications. So as we said that almost all the clients who benefited the most from the project or or who had the highest change scores, positive change scores from pre to post, reported getting tangible benefits in terms of AT devices, um, in terms of assistive technology devices, modifications, or recommendations that they could tangibly and very specifically implement. So like this 52-year-old male client with joint injuries talks about that, they were recommended the exercises, just simple things like, wearing gloves before, using impact tools. So simple recommendations help them a lot. The third factor was the funding for equipment and modifications. And again, this was one of the most important factors. All the clients who improved the most from pre to post received a lot of tangible benefits from VR. It ranged anywhere from just $1,000 to $45,000 plus in funding for like major equipment modifications. It was either through VR or other agencies. Some of it was also self-funded by the farmers. So once they were, they saw the benefit in something, either they themselves installed something or bought something for themselves. They received equipment like ATVs, UTVs, bobcats, tractor steps, lifts, implements, all the different things. Like this farmer, 40-year-old female client with arthritis, she received almost north of $40,000 in farm equipment and assistive technology from Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, and including an ATV and tractor implements for weed cultivation, for harvesting, different types of things. So that helped her gain a lot of mobility back and helped her grow her farming enterprise. Ongoing communication and timeliness of services and trust. So this is the whole relationship aspect with the project staff member. So clients who improved the most talked about frequent communication and check-ins from project staff. That trusting relationship was played a very important role. Like this client, a 52-year-old male with joint injuries, talks about that. One of the best things is that the project helps the farmers, be able to continue doing what they're doing on the farm and continue farming. And then the biggest asset is the project people themselves. So the staff, they play a very important role. In terms of communication, they talked about, like this one client talked about at least once a month to start with, and then they would still have checkups on you even after years, even as time passed by, do you still need something? Are you okay? Some potential barriers, and like I said, there are a lot of these, but we've already talked about, briefly about these. If we want, we can, delve into it later if we have more questions. But many of them did revolve around Vocational Rehabilitation Agency and potential frustrations that clients felt when related to paperwork or delay in services or not being understood and misunderstanding with the vocational rehabilitation counselors. Personal factors, like we looked in the chart, that there were intrinsic motivational, mastery motivation and skills. So clients who had high intrinsic motivation were much more likely to stay engaged with the project, do things themselves, and benefit the most from the project. Extrinsic motivation did play a very important role. So even when intrinsic motivation was low, extrinsic motivation, there was more hand pulling from the staff, more follow-up from the staff, clients were still more likely to stay engaged and benefit. Technological limitations, and then family factors. Now, before we go ahead, I want to talk about a few limitations. So as as we can see that it was a non-random purpose of sampling, and it was a relatively small sample of past clients. So as I mentioned, for confidentiality reasons, it was a two-step process. So first we contacted the project staff, who in turn contacted the clients, took their permission, and then once we had that, then we contacted the clients directly. So this proved to be a barrier because the project staff were very busy. It was very difficult to get them to call the clients. And even when they did diligently call the clients, they had a difficult time reaching the clients due to so many reasons, as I mentioned before, because so much time had lapsed between when the time frame when they were active in the project and now. The sample obviously included more high scorers compared to low scorers. And that's true with any evaluation study that, clients with high scores are much more likely to participate in the evaluation or the research study, much more likely to be reached, and they were much more willing and eager to share about their experience. And conversely, the low scorers either did not respond at all to the project staff or sometimes even declined to participate in the study because of their negative experience with the project. And so I guess future studies can, explore, try to overcome these limitations. In terms of trying to get a longer time frame, and then so that a larger sample could be obtained. Some implications. So one of the most important things, as we talked about, was the staff-client relationship. Relationship building, as we know, it is so critical in this whole experience that clients were so much likely to make changes and connect and engage and benefit from the project if there was a good trusting relationship. Family engagement piece was another factor that it is important to consider the views of all different stakeholders in the client's family to be able to identify their needs and goals as well, so that there will be more support for client engagement. Building relationships with the vocational rehabilitation agency seems to be an important factor, that the more timely services the client received, the more likely they were to stay engaged and benefit from the project. Some other things would be to potentially avoid the pitfalls that have been identified for low scorers, that some things like the technological limitations, and then maybe help assist people a little more, in motivating them to pursue, to be able to overcome the perceptions or experiences that they may have with the vocational rehabilitation agency. So maybe a little more hand-holding on that end. And of course, enhance all the different programmatic factors and, strengthen them, because one of the important things that this study helps us understand is the foundational pillars on which the AgrAbility project is based are pretty strong. I mean, these are the very key things that lead to high impact for clients. So it's important to fortify those pillars and make them stronger, and to focus more on specific nuances and needs of clients, as well as, be able to be cognizant of in terms of avoiding the barriers. So with that, I'll stop here, and we can, discuss more and talk more. I'm sure that it's probably triggered a lot of thoughts and discussions. I think that there are so many implications that each of you can individually even think about at your level. So, I mean, it would be good to, if you want to share or talk about it.
There are no questions in the chat box at this time, but feel free to do so if you have a question for Anita. While people are thinking, I've got a question. I've never heard of the term intrinsic mastery motivation, so I was wondering what that all meant, but it seems like what it means is attitude. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, it's a dimension of attitude which includes a resilience component, and I guess a proactivity component. So clients who are, I guess it's, in very simple terms, it's intrinsic motivation, but a mastery relates to like self-efficacy. So how much power do I think that I can put on the environment to be able to make changes? So how much confidence do I have that what I do is leading to, changes, and how motivated I am to do that? So, I mean, clients who have higher motivation are more likely to be more proactive to, like clients talked about, trying to do new things, more tinkling around on their farm and try to do some things which they never had done before in terms of the AT modifications part. Or they were much more likely to reach out, maybe get more information, figure something out over the internet. So I guess that personal proactivity and motivational piece.
It was interesting to hear, it's on a personal level that the customer or client themselves, but also on the AgrAbility team, they need to also have a positive attitude about the whole thing. So that sort of can motivate people. Any
Yes,
questions?
yes.
I'm not seeing any more questions come into the chat box, so people can voice them if they want to, or write them in the chat box. Dr. Fetsch, I think we're ready for you.
Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Hamida, for your years of delving deeply into the telephone interviews with these 9 people. I know you had a lot of hurdles to overcome in all kinds of ways, and I appreciate the hard work you put into really delving down, trying to figure out what makes the difference between those who gain the most on the quality of life and independent living and those who gain the least. And I think you've highlighted particularly 3 things that I think AgrAbility, when we do our job really well, I think there are 3 things especially that are important. And the first is our on-site visits. As far as I know, I don't know of any other entity that exists other than AgrAbility that makes on-site visits on the farm, that walks in the horse manure, the cow manure, and goes and sees the people and talks with them on their farm, finds out where their successes are and where they're having challenges. I think that's part of our success, and I think you highlighted that very well in the way you put it. Another thing is, I think, as we've learned here in Colorado, you got to involve all the major stakeholders. And if you forget to include grandma who owns the land, or grandpa who's in bed with a disability inside, and you don't include those people in terms of what they want to, you're setting it up that you might have some potential saboteurs with what you set up with the individual. And be sure and include, if they've got a spouse, be sure and include them and any adults, children that might be involved as well. We often have 2 and 3 generations in our on-site visits, and we think that's real important. And the third thing, of course, is working with VR and other funding agencies to try to find funding for the AT that they need if the farmer rancher cannot afford it for themselves. So thank you, Hamida, for coming up and finding out and getting good qualitative data to put flesh and bones on the quantitative studies that we've done in the past, thanks to Dick and others that have been involved in the 14 states that have done that. Does anybody have any further questions of Hamida before I move on? Okay, then I want to share with you a different study. This one is a 25-year study. Here. Can you, let's see, we need to go to here.
Yeah, we can see your slide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, this is a 25-year overview of AgrAbility demographics. We looked at all the demographic data we could find since AgrAbility's inception in 1991 to 2016. And this was a partnership between Robert Petrea, Chip, as many of us knew him at University of Illinois, and Bob Aherin at University of Illinois, and then Paul Jones and Bill Field at Purdue, and me here at Colorado State University Extension AgrAbility. So welcome to a 25-year overview of AgrAbility demographics. In this reporting, I will tell you about what we found in the demographic part of the research data that National AgrAbility Project collects. I won't be covering the quality of life and independent living and working in the next 15 minutes. I'll just be covering the demographics, tell you what we find there. And as Hamida said, the vision of AgrAbility is to enhance quality of life for farmers, ranchers, and other agricultural workers with disabilities so that they, their families, and their communities continue to succeed in rural America. So that's enhanced quality of life. And the question is, how well are we doing in terms of enhancing quality of life? And as part of that, who is an AgrAbility client? Well, an AgrAbility client is an individual with a disability engaged in production agriculture as an owner or operator, family member, or employee, who's received professional services from AgrAbility Project staff during an on-site visit. That is a key factor in terms of really walking on the soil of our clients and seeing things from through their eyes and through their family's eyes as to what their goals are and what their hopes and fears are, and then addressing that as a supportive team, as Hamida was saying. That's a key factor in who does well and who does poorly. Well, this first figure shows back with the first data we have. And as you can see here, there was a lag the first year, 91, 92. There was no data available for that first year, which means that we really have data from 24 of the 25 years. That's 93 to 2016. And every year was what do you call it, a composite year, like 92 and 93, and 93 and 94, 94 and 95. There were parts of 2 years in each reporting year. And this particular bar graph, what we tried to show is the red lines show the total number of client reports or clients served, which included reopened and closed and new and all. And the blue bars show the number of new clients. And as you can see, there are from 1993 to 2002, we didn't ask that question as to how many new clients there were. And so we don't have data there. And then you see in 2001, there is no data. In that particular year, there was a transition and no data was found there. I couldn't go further without giving a hats off to Chip Petrea. Chip worked very hard with National Easter Seals to get that original data back to 91, 92, 93, on up to about 2001. It took an enormous amount of effort, many phone calls. In fact, I think he went to visit in Washington to visit Easter Seals to go through boxes to dig out some of that early data. And then we had to, of course, incorporate it. It was all on paper. And we had to incorporate it into SPSS in order to statistical package for social sciences in order to run our analyses for this particular study and report. And this is all written up in an article by the 5 of us that we published in Journal of Agro-Medicine last year. So thank you, Chip. Without your good work, we would not have that early data from 93 to 2000. Thank you very much, Chip, for getting that to us. Now in this figure, what I wanted to do was to show you the actual data. This is of the new ongoing reopened and closed client reports and the total number of new clients. So if you look at that green line, you'll see where we have data on the number of new clients that you can see how they change over the years from about 400 to almost 780 in 2005. And then it hovers around 450 or so in those years. The total number of clients is the top line, the blue line, and you can see where they hover whenever you include all of the clients we serve and not just the new ones. And this also includes the number of males, the number of females, and gender missing, because we didn't start collecting the data on gender until 2002. So this is a timeline that goes over about 24 years, showing how things have changed over time. And then what we did is try to fill in the gaps. We used our best methods to try to estimate about how many clients do we think were in that gap year 2000, 2001, based on 3 years before and 3 years after. And so that's what I tried to do here, is fill in the gaps with the number of new clients, where you can again see they hover. New clients was the green line here, hovered around 400 to sometimes over 600 per year of new clients. That's individual, unique men and women that AgrAbility has served. And the number of states that were funded are state or regional AgrAbility projects. We affectionately call them SRAPs. And the number of those that were funded varied from 8 originally, as NIFA, USDA NIFA funds were pretty small to begin with, and then went up to 20 now, where we are now. The 20 SRAPs are currently funded. And you can see the total number of new clients in the green line, total overall clients that we have in the blue line, and then the males in the red line, and the females in the blue line, and gender missing. Now, I wanted to share with you this slide because it basically shows two groups. And the total sample reports, of which there are 18,438, you can see that on the left column there, and then the number of new clients sampled. And that was 7,779 new clients that we had data from. And I think one of the important things to see here under new clients in the right column is that what was the origin of their disability? How did they get injured or hurt, or what illness they got, etc. And what we found was that 42% had a chronic non-incident, like arthritis, MS, something like that, 42%. And then 1 out of 3 had a non-ag incident, like maybe a car accident or some other accident that did not involve agriculture. And 1 out of 5 had an agricultural incident. I was surprised about this to begin with, is that I guess I kind of thought that many farmers, based on my dad and my brother, would get their accidents from the farming, from the farm, from falling off a granary or turning over a tractor or some kind of auger incident or something like that. But I was wrong. And like my mentor said to me back in 1985 when I came to Colorado State, Bob, you can have your own ideas of what you think the data will say, but always let the data speak. And that's been good, because that's a good empirical advice. And what you see here is that 1 out of 5 of our farmers and ranchers in this particular study, out of the almost 8,000 new people, said that their source of their origin was related to an ag incident. When you compare the left column with the right column, what you see is that they're pretty similar, 43% versus 42%, 30% versus 32, etc. They're pretty similar in both samples. And here you see it again, basically among new clients, 2 out of 5 people report chronic non-incident related disabilities like arthritis and MS, etc. And 1 out of 3 report their origin was from non-agricultural incidents, and 1 out of 5 are from agricultural incidents. In our sample with the 8,000, almost 8,000 here, most clients work with AgrAbility 2 to 7 years, and the average was about 15 months of time with AgrAbility with the SRAPs they worked with. Well, how many clients did we serve in the 24 years for which we had data? And each year between 1993 and 2016, between 8 and 25 SRAPs served an average of approximately 490 new clients. That's each year. And then when you combine the new, the ongoing, the reopened and closed cases for those 24 years, you have about 1,190 there. And that takes work too. I mean, it takes a lot of time, a lot of working with funders like DVR, et cetera, and working with families, et cetera, with ongoing and reopened cases and closed cases as it does with new. This is a slide that shows when we started collecting the question, we asked the question 01, how many of your clients the last year were new? And then you can see how that peaked in 2005 and has been coming up in 2016 again. So our two groups were similar, our total group and our new group. The age for the new was 52, the age 52.1. The age for the total group was 52.7. So it's pretty similar. And the gender, the males were 3 out of 4 were new, and 78% were total in the total group. So they're pretty similar in both the total group and the new group. And here we've learned that AgrAbility provided information and education service to an estimated 11,754 new clients between 1993 and 2016, those 24 years since we didn't have data for the first year, with around 490 new participants added each year. The average age is about 52 and 3 out of 4 were male. When we count the new, the ongoing, the reopened and closed cases for those 24 years, we served 27,201 clients over those 24 years, which on average was 1,133 per year. So what? Why do we need demographic data? Because some of my friends growl a little bit about having to fill out NAP's demographic data. Well, we need it. It helps us be accountable to the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, to taxpayers, and I'm always very grateful that taxpayers share with us some of the important funds, and that's how we get funded. And I think we owe it to them to be accountable and say, this is what these are the people we served since 1992. And they're farmers and ranchers, important to tell them too. Here's what we found so far, and this is what we know so far from the demographic data. Providing demographic data helps us each year to provide data to policymakers as they decide to continue, discontinue, or expand AgrAbility funding. As you know, the AgrAbility Project is part of the Farm Bill, and the last time was funded was in 2018. And when our national program leader, Brad Ryan, has good data from all of us that we can tell him how many people we served, and with the work that Hamida and I are doing with what difference we make on the quality of life and independent living and working, there's some real empirical evidence that we have with AgrAbility that a lot of other funded entities don't have. We have a good track record of really being able to provide not only quantitative data, but now qualitative data, thanks to Hamida, that shows that some of the effects, some of the impacts that we have. And that helps with our funders, with our senators, and with our legislators who want to know, well, what did you do with the tax dollars you had since 1991? And then the NAP advisory team, the National AgrAbility Project, has an advisory team, and this data helps them make decisions based on empirical data, so they can make better decisions as to who it is that we serve and who it is that are in our sample. Providing demographic data each year helps NAP shape in-service training. Like you might have seen, they do a lot with regard to arthritis, and now they're moving more with FARSAN, Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, into the behavioral health area as well. So these kind of things help us decide what is important and which people are needing the information, education, and service we provide. It also helps us provide directions for marketing efforts as to what we need to do next in terms of fact sheets and different adaptations, et cetera, that need to be created. And it demonstrates the breadth of the overall AgrAbility project during our first 25 years from 91 to 2016. So we appreciate all of you who are AgrAbility people to provide that demographic data, and as well as the quality of life data that you provide, because without that, we wouldn't have near the story to tell that we do, and the empirical evidence that we have that our program actually does work. Here you can see a national map of the 20 states that are currently funded. And we currently have 18 SRAPs that are working with us on the quality of life and independent living and working level. And we do appreciate all those of you who are collecting the quality of life and independent living and working level, because that really helps a lot for us to demonstrate our effectiveness. So why join us? If you join us in our quality of life study and independent living study, you can document your project's effectiveness and increasing your clients' independent living and working quality of life levels. So you'll have some data that you can show in terms of your state's or SRAP's effectiveness. It enhances your chances of receiving funding next time with empirical evidence of your SRAPs quality and effectiveness, along with the other 17 SRAPs. It increases your chances for outside funding by demonstrating your accountability. Because I don't know about you, but I know in the more and more the grants that I write and everything, I find the funders want to know, how are you going to be accountable? How are you going to know if we give you this money as to what difference you're going to make? And fourthly, it's a way of contributing to AgrAbilIty's mission and vision to improve the quality of life of our farmers and ranchers across the country. Well, we've been working and building evidence-based AgrAbility programming. The first article on this study that we published was pretest from 11 SRAPs with almost 400 participants in 2016. Then in 2017, we compared pretest post-test changes from 10 SRAPs. In 2018, we published treatment comparison groups. It was an AgrAbility treatment group with a comparison group of people from 17 states who did not have AgrAbility, and we reported that in Fetsch Turk 2018. And then we have the behavioral health with 14 SRAPs. My colleague, Dr. Collins from Colorado Springs, and I wrote that article. It's a very interesting article to see what difference we made in the psychological well-being of our people. And more recently, that Hamida cited this one, Fetsch and Leathers and Morgan, on AgrAbility motivation and mastery motivation, and what the difference we're making there. And then this particular report comes from this AgrAbility demographics article by Fetsch, Petrea, Jones, Field, and Aherin 2020. And the article that Hamida referred to is Who Gains the Most and Least? And she and I are working on preparing that article for submission. And I'm also working with Dr. Collins on quality of life, SEM. So we're building a road to evidence-based AgrAbility programming over the next 4 years together with your help. Please join us and help us gather the data and do the analyses. With that, Tess, would you please close my slide set? And we'll entertain your questions at this point.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat box at this moment, but participants, as you have heard the two presentations today, if you have some questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
We love AgrAbility here in Kentucky. I'm with the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and John Hancock, the legend, was here, and we have a strong partnership, and just thank you guys for doing what you do and getting the data together.
Thank you. You're welcome. We're glad to work with Kentucky.
I thought of a question when Hamida was making her presentation and following. So I'm thinking that maybe as AgrAbility staff, we might want to ask ourselves, what can I or we do to improve my or our service to AgrAbility clients? Just seemed like that was a really important part of their success, is the relationship that's built. So it seems like it'd be good for each AgrAbility staff member to really think about that. What are we doing well? What can we do better? Does that make sense, Hamida?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many practical implications, and a lot of it is actually, projects like people like you who are on the field who can reflect and add more to this. So we have some things that data has shown us, but I think a lot of the work is around how do we translate that into practical, how would that guide our next steps? So that's a great point. I agree.
I am seeing in the chat box, and everybody got this message if you opened your chat box, but we'd really appreciate your input on evaluating this session. So don't forget to do that, because that's a really important step in this whole thing too. Any questions, comments? Maybe some ideas for future questions or future research that might be also be of importance? It seems like our farmers, the population of farm families across the country is changing too. I know in the Northeast we have a lot more women farmers than we did even 10 years ago. So I would think that that might have an impact on performance as well. When it comes to safety on the farm, injuries, things like that. It might be a whole different set of injuries of what we've been used to seeing. And that the research shows.
One question I had was in going through the data and looking at the importance of the at the work site assessments. Was there any indication of who made up the assessment team, whether 25% of the teams had occupational therapists, 50% had physical therapists, or 35% had voc rehab therapists? Was there any kind of breakdown of those certified folks who actually did the assessments?
Not in this study, but that is a great point for a future study. So I think basically this was a very narrowly focused exploratory study, but I think it has a lot of offshoots in terms of what else can professionally and needs to be explored more. And that's definitely one of the things in terms of, what was that process like, who went, what type of, information was given, and, what works best. So, I mean, in this study, we didn't specifically ask about that, but I mean, some clients did mention the importance of, the occupational therapist and some things like that they receive from therapeutic professionals. But like I said, in this, it was a very, very exploratory study. So it would be very interesting, definitely a point to be noted in terms of recommendations, that would be, knowing that piece of information would help the project a lot, just in terms of, the best practice for what might work. So thanks for sharing.
Dr. Fetsch, you had one slide, sort of a stair-step slide that talked about the different research projects. I'm wondering, are those articles, or journal articles or others that were written, are they posted someplace where people can view them and read them fairly easily?
Yeah, I think so. They're with the NAP. Bill Field sent out a list of publications that over the years that have been published, and they're in there, so you can get them from National AgrAbility Project. Or if you want to email me, I'll be glad to send you the references as well. That's fine. That's robert.fetch@coloradostate.edu. Sure, they can be that way. However, people need to find them either from NAP or from the Colorado AgrAbility Project here in Colorado. You bet.
Great, thank you. Any further questions or comments from our participants or speakers? Thank you very much for today's presentations. Really super information to learn about and to think about. So thank you, Hamida and Robert, for your presentations today. Thank you, Tess, for organizing and facilitating this. And we're really grateful to all you participants who took part. And hopefully you learned some things, and we'll make some contacts with either the speakers or colleagues about what you've heard today. Thank you, everyone.